My name is Samantha Reed. I'm 34, and last autumn I found myself standing in the lobby of the Drake Hotel in Chicago, dressed in the finest outfit I owned, ready to celebrate my brother's wedding. I had spent weeks preparing for the night, choosing a long black gown that was elegant without being loud, something that spoke of confidence rather than spectacle. From the moment I walked into the grand lobby, though, I felt the weight of not belonging. The marble floors gleamed under the light of enormous chandeliers, and the air buzzed with the laughter of men in bespoke suits and women draped in gowns glittering like falling stars. Conversations drifted past me. Talk of mergers, venture funds, startups, and investments, all reminders of the world my brother had stepped into and the world I never seemed to measure up to. Still, I straightened my shoulders and approached the check-in desk. A young woman with a perfect bun greeted me, tablet in hand. I smiled and gave my name. She tapped at her screen, her brow tightening as the seconds stretched. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said carefully, her tone polite but unmoving. "Your name isn't on the list." For a moment, I just stood there, the words knocking the air out of me. I asked her to check again, my voice even though my chest tightened with unease. She glanced down, tapped, and shook her head. "No Samantha Reed." The noise of the lobby faded, replaced by the pounding of my heart. I stepped away from the desk and pulled out my phone. Surely it was some clerical mistake. My brother would clear it up in seconds. He answered quickly, his tone casual, distracted, like he barely had time for me. I explained quietly, trying not to let the tremor in my voice show. "They say I'm not on the guest list." There was a pause, then laughter, sharp, mocking. "You really think you were invited, Samantha?" His words carried a cruelty I hadn't prepared for. "Come on, you work in a lab. That doesn't exactly scream VIP. This night is full of investors, CEOs, people who actually matter. No offense, but you'd stand out in all the wrong ways." The phone was slippery in my hand, my knuckles pale from holding it so tightly. Each word cut deeper, confirming what I had always felt but never thought he would say out loud, that in his eyes, in our family's eyes, I wasn't enough. I managed a small, quiet, I see. Then the line went dead. He didn't even wait for me to respond. I stood alone in the middle of that glittering lobby, strangers swirling around me who didn't even know my name, and I felt myself shrink smaller and smaller. My thoughts pulled me backward to countless family dinners where my brother was the center of gravity. Mom and Dad glowing with pride at his every success, their voices warm with admiration. "He's going places," Mom would say, eyes sparkling as if his achievements were her own. "You should take notes, Samantha." My work, years of pushing through sleepless nights, leading research on genetic therapies, unraveling codes that could change lives, was brushed off as just lab work, a curiosity that never matched the gleam of his job title or the shine of his networking skills. Dad said less, but silence can wound as deeply as words. He never asked about my work, never stepped in when the comparisons came. He simply let them hang in the air, his nods and half-smiles reinforcing what they all believed, that I was the shadow next to my brother's spotlight. Even at Christmas gatherings, while they toasted his promotions or talked endlessly about his new clients, my breakthroughs were acknowledged with a polite nod, then quickly set aside for conversations that mattered more. Standing in that lobby, with the humiliation burning in my chest, I didn't cry. I didn't beg to be let in. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a sealed envelope I had prepared days earlier. Without a word, I handed it to the staff at the desk and asked them to make sure my brother received it during the toast. Then I turned and walked away. The sound of my heels striking the marble echoed behind me as I left the hotel. The night and years of feeling invisible. Hours later, my phone buzzed with urgency. 47 missed calls, a flood of voicemails stacking up, each one more frantic than the last. He had read the letter. What did it say? Let's just say it was enough to shatter the perfect image he had crafted for himself, enough to flip his carefully orchestrated night upside down. That evening at the Drake began like a dream, but it ended with me walking away with my head held high, no longer begging for validation from a family that had never valued me. If you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or told you don't belong, especially by the people meant to love you most, you know the kind of strength it takes to rise above it. Because here's the truth. No one else gets to measure your worth. When my mom pulled me into the kitchen that night, she didn't bother hiding the concern in her voice. "Why don't you try something bigger? Something more ambitious?" she asked, stirring a pot of gravy as if her words were casual. "Your brother's out there closing deals with millionaires. And you're still tucked away in that lab, Samantha. It's not too late to change direction." I bit my tongue. I had already explained 100 times that my research wasn't some small distraction. It had the potential to save lives. But she didn't want to hear it. Instead, she gave my arm a quick pat, the kind meant to soften a dismissal, then walked away. My brother didn't even need to be in the room to cast a shadow over me. His presence lived in every conversation, every comparison, every subtle reminder of what I supposedly lacked. Even my cousin, the one person in the family who usually stood in my corner, couldn't redirect their focus. Later that night, she texted me, clearly frustrated. "They're blind to how incredible you are." But standing in the lobby of the Drake, dressed for a celebration I wasn't even allowed to join, I felt the weight of all those moments crush me at once. This wasn't just about being left off a guest list. It was about years of being minimized, dismissed, and treated as if my work, my very life, didn't measure up. My brother's voice replayed in my head, his mocking laugh reminding me of every time he had brushed me aside. The pain hit sharp and deep, but underneath it, something steadier began to rise. I wasn't going to beg for a place at his table. I wasn't going to let his careless words define my worth. As I turned to leave, my hand brushed against the envelope in my purse, the one I had prepared for him. Originally, it was supposed to be a gesture of goodwill, something to show I cared despite everything. But now, it would serve another purpose. I walked back to the check-in desk, my steps firm, deliberate. The woman behind it looked up, her tight bun gleaming under the chandelier's glow. "Can you do me a favor?" I asked, my voice calm but steady. "Please give this to my brother during the toast." She nodded, curiosity flickering across her face as she took the sealed envelope. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. What was inside was meant only for him. The words would strike harder than any confrontation ever could. It wasn't about money or status. It was about something deeper, tied to his own dreams and vulnerabilities, something he would never have expected from me. As I stepped outside, the city noise wrapped around me, dull compared to the storm inside my head. My thoughts drifted to the summer before, when Justin had shown up at my apartment, beer in hand, sprawled on my couch. He had spent hours bragging about a villa he'd toured in the suburbs. $2 million, Samantha, he'd said, his eyes lighting up. Pool, view, the works. One day I'm buying it. But in between the boasts, he had let something slip. His company was bleeding money. Investors were backing away. Debts were mounting. He waved it off, insisting it was temporary, but I could hear the cracks in his voice. Still, he would never ask me for help. Not me, the sister whose work he considered insignificant. What he didn't know was that I had been planning something for months. Something that could have changed everything for him. A few blocks from the Drake, I spotted Noah waiting for me inside a warm little cafe. His smile, the one that always managed to cut through the noise, pulled me in like a lifeline. I slid into the booth, and the smell of coffee and pastries wrapped around me like a blanket. "What happened?" he asked softly, worry creasing his forehead as he studied my face. So I told him. About the guest list, about my brother's cruel words, about the way my family had dismissed my career for years. Noah didn't interrupt. He just held my hand, his steady presence grounding me. "He doesn't really know you," he said gently. "Not the real you." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded receipt, a reminder of the gift I had been planning. It wasn't some token gesture. It was monumental. Something that could have kept Justin's company afloat, maybe even put him in that dream house he never stopped talking about. I was going to give him something big, I admitted, my voice tight. Something that might have saved his company. But after tonight, I let the words hang in the air. Noah tilted his head, waiting, his silence urging me to finish. "I can't do it," I said firmly. "Not after this." As I sipped my coffee, bitter and sharp, a new idea began to take root. Maybe the gift wasn't wasted. Maybe it just needed to be redirected. My mind turned to the research institute where I spent my days, a place racing against time to develop treatments for rare diseases. They needed help. They needed real funding, not empty promises. My brother doesn't deserve it, I said, the decision settling into me like steel. The institute does. I'm donating it all to them. Noah's eyes lit up, pride softening his smile. That's who you are, he said. That's the real you. You don't need their approval. I pulled out my phone and drafted an email to my financial advisor, my fingers steady as I outlined the donation. When I hit send, it felt like a weight had lifted, a burden I had carried for too long finally sliding off my shoulders. This wasn't about Justin anymore. It wasn't about proving my worth to him or anyone else. It was about taking control of my story, choosing to put my energy and resources where they could make a real difference. For the first time in years, I felt free. As I pressed send, a strange peace washed over me. The kind of calm that comes only when you've stopped explaining, stopped begging, and finally decided to let the truth stand on its own. I didn't know what my brother would do when he read the letter, but one thing was certain. I wasn't the one losing tonight. An hour later, I was tucked into the corner of a warm little cafe, the air filled with roasted coffee beans and quiet jazz. Noah sat across from me, idly stirring his drink, his eyes darting to my phone as it buzzed across the table. At first, I thought it might be him, the message I'd been waiting on. But the name glowing across the screen froze me. Justin, my brother. The first call went unanswered, then the second, then the third. By the 10th, my heart had shifted from steady to restless. Noah arched a brow, the hint of a grin tugging at his mouth. Persistent, isn't he? He murmured. I only shrugged, but inside, curiosity twisted. What had changed in the span of 1 hour to make Justin, who had sneered at me in front of his glittering guests, suddenly this desperate? I didn't need to be there to picture it. The ballroom at the Drake, the chandeliers gleaming, my brother, standing tall in his tailored suit, glass raised mid-toast. Somewhere between the applause and the laughter, he'd torn open my letter, maybe expecting some cloying apology, some attempt at reconciliation. But instead, he'd been handed the unvarnished truth, that I wasn't the insignificant sister he paraded as a failure, that I wasn't just a lab tech. I was Samantha Reed, director of a biotech project valued in the millions. And worse for him, I had intended to give him a gift that could have rewritten his future. $5 million, $3 million earmarked to clear the crushing debts his company pretended didn't exist. $2 million to buy the suburban palace he and Paige had been drooling over for months. My words hadn't pleaded for his respect. They had revealed exactly what he had chosen to discard by mocking me. I imagined his smirk collapsing, his confidence draining as he realized what he'd done. The phone rattled again, this time with a voicemail notification. I slid the volume low and pressed play. My brother's voice, once so smooth, now cracked and frantic. Samantha, what is this? 5 million? You're a director? Call me back. Please. Another followed, stumbling. I didn't know. Okay, I messed up. Let's talk. By the time I glanced again, 43 missed calls stared back at me. My messages were drowning in his texts. You can't be serious. Why didn't you tell me? We need this, Sam. Please. The desperation bled through every word. But instead of softening, it only hardened the line inside me. He had made his choice when he'd humiliated me in front of his world. Then came another ring, Mom. For a moment, I hesitated, but I picked up. Her voice cut sharp, dripping with reproach. Samantha, how could you? You've been hiding this, your job, this money. You let us believe you were nothing. The sting hit as it always did, but I bit back. She didn't ask why I'd kept silent. Didn't wonder what it had cost me to sit through years of their dismissals. No, she leapt straight to accusation. Dad's call followed soon after, his tone softer, but still heavy with disappointment. You should have told us, Sam. Your brother's in trouble. That gift could have fixed everything. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I only said, you never asked about my work. And I ended the call. Their words echoed all the years of minimization, of being the afterthought in my own family. But I was done carrying that burden. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my cousin Lily. She'd been at the wedding, watching the whole thing unravel in real time. Sam, it's chaos here. Justin read your letter out loud, thinking it was part of the toast. Now everyone's whispering. His investors are asking about you. They know your name. They've done deals with you in biotech. Paige is trying to laugh it off, but she's pale as paper. I could see it without even trying. Paige, in her perfect gown, forcing a brittle smile as the room shifted against her husband. The CEOs, the venture capitalists, all realizing that the woman Justin had tried to erase was someone they already respected in their world. Lily's next message was a dagger. He's panicking. Keeps saying he didn't mean it. I leaned back in the booth, the cafe humming softly around me, and let the weight of it sink in. The night was no longer his. It was mine. Noah's hand found mine, his eyes steady as if anchoring me in the moment. You okay? He asked softly. I gave a small nod, a calm strength rising within me. For years, I had bent myself to fit the mold my family carved, shrinking down to avoid their cutting remarks. But the letter I'd sent wasn't just words for Justin. It was my declaration, my boundary drawn clear. I no longer needed their approval. With that certainty, I flipped my phone face down and silenced it. The buzzing stopped, and with it, the heavy pull of their expectations dissolved. For the first time, I wasn't escaping them. I was breaking free from the version of myself they had forced me into. By the next morning, the story had spread far past the wedding walls. My brother's carefully built image was crumbling, and I hadn't lifted a hand to speed it along. Investors, the very people he'd boasted about while using me as a prop for his superiority, were suddenly talking about me. One biotech executive, someone I'd met briefly at a symposium last spring, recognized my name the moment it circulated. Before sunrise, he had emailed his colleagues, piecing together that I wasn't just a background figure in a lab coat, but the director of a project worth millions, leading cutting-edge work in gene therapy. Another investor, already supporting trials from my institute, joined in, sending a message into a group chat that ignited like wildfire. Justin Reed's sister is Samantha Reed. He called her a nobody. Whispers shifted quickly into outright criticism. Some called him careless, others arrogant for dismissing someone holding such weight in their shared industry. At a breakfast meeting, one of Justin's most important backers, a venture capitalist with a sizable stake in his startup, confronted him. You mean to tell me you didn't know your own sister runs a biotech powerhouse? He asked sharply. Justin stumbled, trying to minimize it, but the damage was irreversible. Before noon, 2 investors had already emailed their intentions to freeze funding, citing doubts about his judgment. They weren't just seeing a sibling spat. They were seeing a man unable to read people, blind to talent, and reckless enough to alienate a significant figure in a sector they valued highly. His charm, usually the weapon he wielded best, faltered under their questioning eyes. His company, already fragile, teetered further as news spread across Chicago's tech circles. Even Paige couldn't escape the fallout. She had built her entire persona around being Justin's poised partner, throwing dinner parties for clients, dressing the part at galas, weaving herself into circles that admired success. But as Justin's credibility unraveled, doors began closing on her as well. A charity event she had poured herself into abruptly removed her from its committee, citing recent developments as too distracting. She tried to patch over the cracks with cheerful posts on social media, photos painted in glossy perfection. But the comments told another story. Did you know about Samantha? One asked bluntly, your husband really ruined things. Read another. By midday, the curated post stopped. Her silence said more than words ever could. The circle she had strained to join was closing ranks, and she was left outside, bound to Justin's mistake. That morning, as I sat in the quiet of my kitchen with Noah, sipping tea, I told him the part one hadn't shared yet. I donated it, I said evenly. The whole account. All $5 million. Straight to the Institute. His brow furrowed, not in doubt, but in awe. All of it, he asked. I nodded. $3 million could have kept Justin's company alive, and $2 million could have secured him the villa he daydreamed about. But this wasn't about him anymore. That money would breathe life into trials for children battling rare diseases. I explained how the Institute had been struggling and how this donation might be the push that saved lives. Noah tightened his hold on my hand, warmth and admiration in his touch. "You're incredible," he said quietly. "This is bigger than any of them." I hadn't touched my phone since silencing it the night before, but Noah had been scrolling through updates from colleagues and peers. He turned the screen toward me, showing a post from a biotech group we both followed. A researcher I had worked with had written, "Huge congratulations to Samantha Reed, newly appointed director of our gene therapy initiative, now backed by a remarkable donation to accelerate clinical trials." The thread beneath it overflowed with praise, but sprinkled among them were blunt remarks about the wedding. She wasn't even invited by her own brother? One person wrote, "Another Justin Reed venture is going under while Samantha Reed is shaping the future of medicine," added another. They weren't cruel, but they cut to the truth. His dismissal of me had backfired spectacularly. Still, I didn't feel a rush of triumph. Instead, a steady resolve filled me. For so long, I had measured myself against Justin's glittering facade, trying to prove myself in a family that only seemed to notice noise and flash. But now the world saw what I had always quietly known. My work mattered, not because of their validation, but because of the lives it might change. Noah set his phone down and looked at me with a gentle smile. "They're finally seeing you for who you are," he said. And I smiled back, not because Justin was stumbling, but because I had finally stepped out of his shadow, standing taller than ever before, certain of the path that was mine alone. 3 days later, I stepped into my parents' living room. The air felt dense, carrying that uneasy silence a family keeps when they know they've gone too far, but aren't ready to admit it. My dad had phoned me the night before, his tone weighted, asking me to come by. "We need to sort this out, Sam," he'd said, though he never explained exactly what this was. I agreed, not because I felt I owed them anything, but because I needed to face them one final time, to say aloud the words I had buried for years. They were all there when I arrived. My mom by the fireplace, standing stiffly with her arms folded, as though bracing herself. Dad in his armchair, rubbing his temples like he could smooth away the tension. Justin slouched, his tie loosened, his eyes flickering toward me then darting away, the mark of someone who hadn't slept. Paige perched beside him, rigid and defensive, her arms locked tight across her chest. Even Lily was there, small and quiet in the corner, watching everything unfold. No one spoke at first. The silence pressed down, heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. Justin finally broke it. "Sam, I didn't mean it," he said, his voice low and practiced. "The guest list was tight. You know how it is. I didn't think you'd care." His words were flimsy, nothing more than an attempt to rewrite what he'd done. I tilted my head, one eyebrow raised, letting him squirm in the quiet that followed. "You didn't think I'd care," I repeated, my voice calm but sharp enough to cut. "You laughed at me, Justin. You told me my work was worthless. You made sure I felt like I didn't belong in your world of important people." My mother jumped in before he could respond, her tone sharp as glass. "Samantha, you should have told us you were some big director. We thought you were just tinkering around in a lab." Her words stung, but not because they were new. She had always dismissed what I did, treating my career like a pastime instead of a calling. I looked at her steadily. "I did tell you, Mom. Every time I tried to explain my work, you brushed it aside. You want to talk about Justin's deals, his clients, his life. You never wanted to hear mine." Dad cleared his throat, trying to soften the edges of the conversation. "Let's not point fingers, Sam," he said cautiously. "Your brother's company is struggling. That money you mentioned in the letter, you could have helped him." I took a slow breath, knowing this was the moment. "I plan to," I said, turning to Justin. "I was going to open a savings account in your name. $5 million. $3 million to erase your company's debts. $2 million for that villa you wouldn't stop talking about. I wanted to help you, even after everything." Justin's jaw slackened. Paige gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But I didn't stop. My voice remained steady. "I didn't give it to you. I donated it to the research institute I work with. It's funding trials for children with rare diseases, something far bigger than your startup or your dream house. The words dropped into the silence like stones in water, their weight rippling through the room. Justin's face flushed red, his hands balling into fists. "You gave it away," he sputtered. "That was mine. You can't just—" I cut him off. "It was never yours, Justin. It was my decision to make, and I made it." Mom stepped forward then, her voice no longer sharp but softened, almost pleading. "Samantha, we're family. You can't turn your back on us like this." I shook my head. "I'm not turning my back. I'm drawing a line. You pushed me aside, made me feel small, treated me like I didn't matter. I'm done letting you define me." I stood, my choice final. "I didn't come here to repair what you broke. I came here to make myself clear." Then I walked out, shutting the door behind me, their stunned faces burning in my mind. Later, Lily's message lit up my phone. She'd stayed behind and filled me in. "They turned on Justin after you left," she wrote. "Mom screamed at him for being so reckless. Said he embarrassed the family. Dad barely said a word, just shook his head. Paige stormed out crying. Lily added that Mom tried to smooth things over, insisting there was still hope to work it out. But the cracks had widened too far. Justin's arrogance, his hunger to control how everyone saw us, had finally exposed itself. The family was splintering, and he was at the center. Back in my apartment, I told Noah everything. He listened quietly, steady as always. When I finished, he reached for my hand. "You did what you had to do," he said warmly. "You stood up for yourself. That's enough." For the first time in years, I felt lighter. I had laid down the burden I'd carried for so long. The family I had fought to please was behind me, and I realized I was okay with that. A year later, I stood in my new office, the Chicago skyline glittering below me. My work had taken me to new heights, leading a biotech company making headlines for breakthroughs in gene therapy. The corner office, the awards, the recognition, all of it mattered, but none of it was the real victory. The real win was the life I'd built, one where I no longer chased my family's validation. Meanwhile, Justin's world collapsed. He learned about my donation when the Institute announced a $5 million grant in my name. His company, already shaky, lost its investors after the wedding fiasco and couldn't recover. By spring, it was bankrupt. He was left with nothing but debts and whispers that followed him everywhere. Paige, once his loudest supporter, grew colder. She blamed him for the humiliation, for the endless gossip. Their marriage frayed under the weight of late-night arguments Lily overheard and shared with me. "He's not the same," she texted. "Paige keeps talking about leaving." My life was moving forward. Noah and I planned a wedding at a quiet lakeside venue. White flowers, gentle music, and only the people who truly knew and supported us. When Mom called, her voice hesitant, asking to be included, I listened silently. Dad followed with a message, and even Justin reached out, claiming he wanted to make amends. Their words felt hollow, like echoes of a past I'd outgrown. "This day is ours," I told Noah. He nodded, squeezing my hand. I sent polite but firm replies to each of them. No invitations, no exceptions. Lily was the only one I welcomed, her loyalty unwavering. The wedding was everything I dreamed. I walked down the aisle in a dress that felt like me, simple, elegant, honest. Noah's smile steadied me, his vows promising a life built on respect and love. Our friends, colleagues, and mentors from the Institute surrounded us, filling the night with warmth. There was no judgment, no shadow of my family's disapproval. Just joy, just freedom. As we danced beneath the stars, I felt peace I had never known before. Looking back, I realized what that night at the Drake had taught me. Self-respect means more than clinging to family who belittle you. For years, I believed I had to earn their pride, that I wasn't enough until they said I was. But the moment I chose myself, my work, my values, my boundaries, I discovered freedom. I don't regret walking away. Not from the money, not from them. My donation saved lives. My career made a difference. And my life with Noah is full of love that doesn't demand I make myself small. To anyone who hears this, you don't have to stay where you're diminished. If you've chosen yourself against expectations, tell your story. Let's remind each other that leaving behind what hurts us is not weakness, it's courage. I'm happier now than I ever believed I could be. And I know you can find that too.